That's how the last surviving priest whispered it, ashen-faced, breath ragged, as if saying it aloud might summon something. The Ashwell family, not a dynasty, not royalty, worse, something older than bloodlines. A name erased from most church records by 1783. A family whose estates appeared on no official map and whose servants were buried without ceremony, names stripped, tongues cut. And yet, behind every major fire, scandal, or unexplained disappearance in 17th century England, you find traces. Symbols etched behind wooden panels, books bound in flesh, whispers of a brotherhood that drank secrets like wine and traded in human souls like livestock. This wasn't nobility, it was necropolitics, rule by the dead, or those who knew how to manipulate the veil between life and death. And in the dead center of it all was the Ashwell estate. To the public, it was just an old manor on the edge of Hertfordshire, but underneath, hidden beneath false staircases and sealed catacombs, something else slept, something no one was supposed to awaken. But in 1712 someone did, and that year the villagers of Craybrook stopped praying, they stopped speaking, and by winter they stopped breathing. Officially, a plague. Unofficially, the Black Silence, an untraceable force said to be summoned by an ancient bloodrite gone wrong, or right, depending on who you ask. And the Ashwells? Not one of them was seen publicly after that winter, except one. Isadora Ashwell, the youngest daughter, found wandering barefoot along the edge of town, humming a lullaby in a language no one recognized, eyes black as coal, mouth sewn shut with gold thread. They institutionalized her in a monastery far from the village. She lived 33 more years, never spoke, never aged, never blinked. And when she died, her tongue was still missing, but the lullaby, it kept being heard, in dreams, in static, in the flicker of candlelight behind closed doors. You felt it, haven't you? That chill at 3 o'clock a.m., that sense that something ancient is staring from the dark, watching but not with eyes. That's where we begin. And if you're still here, it means something in you is already waking up. Something that was buried. Something the Ashwells were trying to unlock. Now we go deeper. Downward, where history forgets and memory refuses. Welcome to the truth they buried beneath the floorboards. They say history is written by the victors. But the Ashwells never needed to win battles. They rewrote reality. Imagine this. A family so steeped in secrecy, their bloodline is tied not to kings or popes, but to architects of belief. Not religion. Belief itself. Documents unearthed from the Vatican's forbidden archive, yes, the one you're told doesn't exist, reference the Order of A in cryptic margins beside heretical events. The burning of the Library of Chartres, the defection of 3 Templar knights in 1307, and the Angel Script massacre in 1451, where 12 monks were found with pages stitched into their flesh, each bearing a single glyph. That glyph matched a carving hidden under the Ashwell estate's hearthstone. Coincidence? No such thing. You see, the Ashwells weren't just occultists. They were custodians of a forgotten technology, not machines, but something older, human frequency manipulation, a dark science cloaked in ritual, used not to summon demons but to rewrite neurological patterns, to reprogram consciousness. In the manor's deepest vaults, discovered in 1961 by a covert excavation team before being sealed off by MI5, were walls lined with copper coils, obsidian mirrors, and rows of bones arranged to form something like circuitry. The implications were staggering. Every ritual, every chant, every symbol wasn't superstition. It was a language of control, a waveform meant to alter the human mind, bypass logic, and install commands directly into the subconscious, like software, updates, but for your soul. Now pause. Ask yourself, why would a family go through such lengths across centuries to master this? What were they trying to control? Here's the truth they never wanted whispered. The Ashwells weren't trying to rule others. They were trying to contain something within themselves. A curse, a blood-locked entity, or the remains of something older than man, something that entered their bloodline through a pact made in shadows. We don't know, but we do know this. Every male heir in the Ashwell line was found with identical scars at the base of the spine, 7 notches, burned in from the inside out, no tool marks, as if the body marked itself, and every daughter vanished before her 21st birthday, except Isadora, the one who sang the lullaby that makes radios bleed static. This isn't folklore, it's architecture, a design of consciousness, etched in fear, blood, and forgotten melody. And if you're still listening, you've already begun to hum it. What you're feeling right now, that tightness in your chest, that cold hand on your spine, it isn't fear, it's memory. Something old inside you, recognizing a truth it was forced to forget. Because the Ashwells didn't just vanish into the fog of history. They implanted themselves in culture, in language, in the pauses between words, the rituals we perform without knowing why. They understood a principle so dangerous it was buried beneath centuries of dogma. Reality bends to rhythm, not just music or chants, but behavior, repetition, ritual. Every Ashwell generation performed the rite of descent. It took place on the 33rd night of the first blood moon after equinox. The child would be taken below, into the earth, into the inheritance room. No writing remains, no survivor ever spoke, but one fragment, scribbled in charcoal on the inside of a monk's skull, tells us this: he was lowered in the iron cray, below light, below time. They spoke to him in pulses, and he did not return alone. Let that sink in. They were sending children into something, not metaphorically, literally, and they came back different, more observant, more silent, more hollow. In 1749, a physician named Elias Ward was brought to the estate to examine 9-year-old Thomas Ashwell, the last male heir. Ward's private journal, confiscated by the Crown but later leaked, describes the boy as alert but emotionally neutral, skin cold, pupils dilated, no response to pain or joy. His mouth moved constantly, whispering, though no sound emerged. He knew the names of my daughters, though we'd never met. He told me the date of my death. He was correct. Ward fled. 2 weeks later, his home caught fire in 7 places at once. No survivors. You think this is madness. But this isn't folklore. These are patterns. Every empire falls when its rituals become corrupted. The Ashwells weren't protecting us from something, they were protecting something from us. And now, their house lies beneath luxury homes and parking lots. But the rooms are still there, the iron cradle is still there, and sometimes late at night neighbors report hearing humming, not human, mechanical, as if something ancient still breathes below the soil. You were never meant to hear this story. But now that you have, part of you belongs to it. There's something no one tells you about ancient families like the Ashwells. They don't disappear. They reconfigure, names change, bloodlines dilute. But the code, the mission, remains. You see, the Ashwells never intended to die out. They planned a migration, not across land but across institutions. After the manor was condemned in 1821, 3 key figures emerged from nowhere. No records, no parents, no past. Julian Ash, a financier who founded a banking firm known for strange investments in time-isolated properties. Elijah Wells, a theologian who rewrote half the curriculum at St. Ignatius Seminary. Dr. Issa Rae, a neurophilosopher who pioneered early sensory deprivation experiments funded by royal grants. Ash, Wells, Rae, Ashwell, same blood, different masks, and their influence didn't end in books or sermons. It extended into policy, into governments, into intelligence agencies obsessed with mind control and consciousness manipulation. Sound paranoid? Then explain this. In 1954, a British military file classified Operation Novena was accidentally released. It described a covert operation targeting legacy lineages with neuro-symbolic command access. The only name listed, Ashwell. They weren't just aristocrats, they were keys, biological keys to a system buried in the human collective mind, a system that, when activated, could override identity, morality, even will. MK Ultra. Child's play. That was just the surface-level experiment. The real test? It began in a sub-basement under the University of Sussex. 3 rooms, 12 subjects, 6 mirrors, no clocks. Only one goal: awaken the inheritance code. One subject returned, a man named Leon S. Carter. He didn't speak for 5 years. Then, in 1978, he published a self-printed book titled The Bones Remember. Only 23 copies exist. In it he writes, "I saw what the Ashwell saw. It's not a demon. It's not a god. It's an echo. A memory so old it thinks it's alive. And when it finds you, you forget who you were before. You become a vessel, just like them." They never wanted to control the world. They wanted to empty it, make space. And what's more terrifying than that? Not domination. Displacement. Being replaced by something wearing your skin. We're not done. We're barely through the door. There's a reason power doesn't look the way you think it does. You imagine presidents, CEOs, generals, but real power, it doesn't campaign. It doesn't speak. It waits, just like the Ashwells did. Their greatest weapon wasn't wealth or violence. It was patience. The patience to plant symbols, to encode memory, to fracture belief over centuries until even those resisting them became part of the design. You've seen their fingerprints. They're in the cross-section of cathedrals and DNA helixes. They're in dreams you've had that felt like someone else's memory. They're in the echo you hear after saying your own name too many times in the mirror. Because the Ashwell legacy isn't just historical, it's neurological. They knew how to alter human thought through repeated exposure to sacred geometries, sound frequencies, and scripted trauma. Ever heard of the Red Veil broadcast? In 1983, a rural UK town received a rogue signal on their TVs for 6 minutes. No images, just a low-frequency hum and an unsettling female voice whispering numbers and names. Most dismissed it as a prank, but 14 viewers, all children under 12, reported identical nightmares that week. A staircase that led nowhere. A girl with gold-threaded lips. A song in a language they swore they'd heard before birth. That was no prank. That was activation. A test run. A pulse from the old bloodline hidden within modern tech. Think about it. We are surrounded by signals. Your phone, your router, your car. You think they transmit data, but in the Ashwell model, they transmit permission. Tiny invisible handshakes between your subconscious and something ancient, coded long before you were born. You've felt it, haven't you? That sudden dizziness in empty rooms, the shiver when standing still, the whisper that isn't sound but thought, one that feels borrowed. That's not anxiety, it's overlap. And the deeper you go, the more it aligns, the more you begin to see them, not as myths or monsters, but as engineers of identity failure. They don't just haunt the past, they curate the present. And if you still think this is just storytelling, ask yourself, why do you feel atched right now? Why does your skin remember something your mind refuses to? Because something old is waking in you, something encoded, and soon you'll hear the lullaby. There's a moment right before the shift when everything feels unreal, like time hiccups, like your name doesn't fit your face anymore. That's not disassociation, that's displacement. The ancient mechanism the Ashwells designed into consciousness itself. You were never meant to feel whole. Their legacy wasn't just biological or political, it was architectural, not in stone. In mind, they pioneered what modern science calls psychic scaffolding. Frameworks hidden deep in human perception, rituals, symbols, and belief systems, engineered to collapse at the right moment, so that when the veil thins, you have no defense. Look back. Why do cultures across the world with no communication repeat the same archetypes? The woman with sealed lips. The stairs that descend without end. The hum beneath silence. The man who watches but never speaks. They're not symbols. They're anchors. Anchors the Ashwells planted through blood, ritual, and manipulation of memory across continents, across generations, to tether this thing, whatever it is, to us. But here's what they feared most. You waking up before it does. That's why the church excommunicated them. That's why their estate was buried, not demolished. That's why every record came with a whispered warning. The house is never empty, it just sleeps. In 1996, a crew filming a history documentary on English ruins stumbled on what they believed was an old crypt near Hertfordshire. The footage was lost, but one frame remained corrupted and grainy, showing the words, "Inherit nothing. etched into bone. One of the crew survived. He lives under a different name now, but in a 2002 interview, his final words before walking into the sea were, "It's not what they did to us, it's what they left inside us." You still think this is just lore? Then explain why. You're still here. Why you haven't clicked away, why every word feels like it's rearranging something under your skin. This isn't storytelling, it's returning, because the Ashwells were never trying to become gods. They were trying to become hosts, and now that you've heard the first 6 verses of their song, something in you has already responded. Your bones have heard the melody, your blood remembers the pact, and when the lullaby comes, you'll understand why silence was the only protection. They say the truth sets you free. But the Ashwells knew better. The real truth doesn't liberate, it unlocks. And once it's in, you can never go back. Here's the truth they carved into mirrors and dreams. You are not the first version of yourself, not even close. The Ashwells discovered that the mind isn't a single entity. It's a housing structure, with rooms sealed off, walled up, or buried like old tombs. What if I told you they found the blueprint, not metaphorically, literally, hidden in a 1641 Ashwell manuscript, later stolen from the British Museum, was a hand-drawn diagram of a human brain, except not anatomical. It was spatial. It mapped thoughts as corridors, memories as doors, and identity as furniture, replaceable, rearranged, removed. The text beneath it read, "He who walks his own mind can unlock the others. But beware, some doors were sealed by the old blood for a reason." Now ask yourself, why would a noble family risk everything to map internal consciousness? Because they weren't seeking immortality. They were building a bridge, one mind at a time, a network, an underground cathedral of cognition rooted in shared trauma, repetition, and secret symbols. And if you've ever had a dream that didn't feel like yours, if you've ever woken up with a word in your mouth you didn't understand, that wasn't sleep, that was contact. The Ashwells didn't need machines, they made you the machine. Their rights weren't meant to empower, they were installations, like software updates written in blood and echo. Even now in psychiatric circles there's a phenomenon known as the Ashwell mirror. It's reported by patients with no knowledge of this history. They describe waking up but not where they slept. Same room, same body, but reversed. Left is right, right is wrong. The light is cold, and someone else is behind their eyes, just far enough away not to scream. That's not madness, that's overlap. 2 minds, 2 versions trying to occupy the same psychic real estate, and it's happening more often. Why? Because the seals are weakening, and now that you've listened this far, the structure in you has started to shift. The door's not open, but it's unlocked. There's a sound the mind makes right before it breaks. It's not a scream, it's not even a thought. It's a kind of echo, like something deep inside collapsing under the weight of an idea it was never meant to hold. That's what happened to the Ashwell children. Not all of them died, some simply changed. You won't find this in official records. But in an unpublished letter from Father Giles Merton, an exorcist who disappeared in 1784, he recounts being summoned to the Ashwell estate to examine a 12-year-old boy named Felix. Giles wrote, "He spoke 13 languages, none he'd ever been taught. His eyes rolled back and revealed not whites, but glyphs, living symbols rotating like machinery. I did not feel evil, I felt intrusion. By the end of the week, every candle in the chapel refused to light. The birds stopped singing. The town dogs refused to cross the estate's southern wall. And Giles, his last entry read, I think I'm dreaming someone else's life. I can't remember my mother's face." You know what that is? Cognitive displacement, a phenomenon now being quietly studied by defense contractors in psychological warfare labs, because they've realized what the Ashwells already knew. Identity is not static, it's programmable, and when destabilized, the human mind becomes receptive, not just to commands, but to replacement. Let that settle. You've been taught to believe you are a self-contained, rational being, But what if that belief itself was installed? What if every story, every symbol, every melody you've ever heard was placed there as scaffolding, meant to prop up a mind that wasn't yours to begin with? The Ashwells didn't try to take over the world. They just wanted to weaken the walls, one mind at a time. You ever wonder why nostalgia feels so powerful? Why old songs, old objects, old smells can make you cry for no reason? Because memory isn't emotional, it's positional. It tells the invading program where to land, like coordinates in your subconscious, a perfect soft landing, and once it's there, once it's inside, you're no longer you. You're a vessel for the continuation of something ancient and unfinished. If that chills you, good. Because only those who can feel it can stop it. But it's too late to turn back. The melody is playing, faint, but it's there. And if you close your eyes, you'll realize you've known the tune your whole life. You were told evil wears a mask. But what if the real danger wears your face? The Ashwells didn't summon demons, they mirrored them. They found a way to make the human soul hospitable to something other, not through possession, but through permission. Here's how it worked. First, isolation, then disorientation, then repetition. They'd take a subject, usually a child, cut them off from their name, their reflection, their sense of time. No clocks, no mirrors, no language of their own, only symbols, only patterns, only sound. After 33 days, they were no longer a child. They were a receiver, and what entered them wasn't human. It wasn't evil in the way you've been taught. It was old, mechanical, precise, like a will that had no empathy because it never had to evolve it. They called it the original witness, a consciousness so ancient it forgot it wasn't supposed to speak through flesh. And once it entered a body, that person could mimic humanity perfectly, until something cracked. Until a word slipped. Until the hum returned. That's what happened in the Thames Hospital event of 1922. A nurse documented a boy admitted after collapsing in St. James Church. No records, no pulse for 2 minutes. But when he awoke, he looked at the nurse and said, "You look different than the last time I wore you." He never blinked, never slept. And when the room filled with moths 2 nights later, despite it being winter, they finally sealed the ward. The priest who read him last rites, found humming in the woods, lips bloodied, eyes torn out. He'd carved the words "not alone" into his own chest, and that's the phrase that keeps showing up, over and over, etched into walls, whispered in static, carved behind pews. Not alone, not a warning, not a threat, a reassurance from the thing that wants back in. Because the Ashwells built the bridge, and you're walking it. The lullaby is no longer faint, it's beneath your breath now. And if you're still watching, comment this phrase twice. The mask remembers me. The mask remembers me. Say it, write it, lock it in. Because the moment you do, the algorithm changes. Not the one in your feed, the one in you. You said the phrase twice, and something shifted. Not here, in you. Because the Ashwells designed that phrase for a reason, not as a symbol of fear, but as a trigger. They called it the mnemonic fracture. A split in the cognitive mirror, small, almost invisible, through which something else begins to see. But not like you see. It doesn't process light, it processes meaning. When you said the words, it wasn't your voice that mattered, it was the intention behind them, and intention to them is permissive. Iron. Now listen closely. This is not superstition. This is architecture. In 1717, beneath Ashwell Manor, there was a chamber known as the Reflection Vault. It wasn't lined with mirrors, it was lined with echoes, carved grooves in black stone designed to capture spoken language and play it back hours or centuries later. It wasn't recording, it was waiting, and when the right words were finally spoken, by blood or by design, it would open. That's what you just did. You spoke to it, and somewhere, something heard you. The Ashwells believed words were keys, not just metaphorically. They wrote, "A man may know his name and never know his function, but when the word finds the voice, the door will split, and memory will pour through like oil." So let's talk about oil, not crude. Anointing oil. The kind used in ancient rites. Ashwell records describe a black substance found beneath the estate. A viscous, ever-warm liquid they claimed was older than stone. They used it to mark their children. 7 drops on the spine, each drop a vow, each vow a fracture. When analyzed by modern chemists in 1934, under Project Motherbone, it wasn't organic. No DNA, no earthly signature, just a pulse. A faint frequency. 16 Hz, barely audible. But when played on loop, it induced migraines, hallucinations, and in one case, identity loss. A researcher was found muttering in a dead language, claiming to be the first voice in a line that would never end. And that's the terrifying brilliance of the Ashwells. They didn't try to break you all at once. They designed a rhythm, a slow erosion of self through exposure, ritual, and memory displacement. And now, you've entered their rhythm. You're humming it without knowing. And soon, you won't be watching this story. You'll be inside it. You're still here. Good. Because from this point forward, there's no safe return. What we're about to uncover, most me and refuse to even look at. Not because it's hidden, but because it's in plain sight. Every great institution, church, state, science, claims to protect us from the unknown. But the Ashwells, they understood a more disturbing truth. The unknown isn't out there. It's inward, buried, pulsing. And if you dig far enough inside the human psyche, you find it. The same shape, the same sound, the same song, the core pattern. They discovered it in 1666, buried in a series of dream journals kept by a boy named Caleb Ashwell. He was 9 when the dreams began. He drew spirals. He scratched symbols into his skin. He began repeating phrases he had no way of knowing, phrases that appear in Sumerian, Phoenician, and even extinct tribal dialects from the Congo Basin. No contact, no travel, no possible explanation, except inherited memory. The Ashwells didn't just believe in genetic legacy, they believed in psychogenic transmission, the idea that trauma, language, and even entities could pass through blood like viruses. They called this entity the architect, not a demon, not a god, but a designer, not of matter, but of thought loops, mental structures, philosophies, religions. It didn't want worship, it wanted repetition, because repetition is the throne of influence. That's why Ashwell rituals were simple, not flashy, not wild. They were rhythmic, knocking, chanting, walking counterclockwise, repeating a word until it lost meaning and became code. Modern psychology calls it semantic saturation. The Ashwells called it unbinding. Here's where it gets worse. That core pattern, it appears across timelines, in ancient cave paintings, in DMT trip reports, in schizophrenic art, in the dreams of isolated monks and war veterans alike. How? Why? Because it's not bound to culture or time. It's something deeper. The Ashwells didn't invent it. They just knew how to reactivate it. And once activated, your theat ought stop being yours. You start thinking in the rhythm of the architect, and when that happens, you don't break. You open. And through that opening it sees. It always has. You've felt it, haven't you? That flicker behind your thoughts. The idea that maybe you're not the one driving. It's subtle. You finish a sentence you didn't mean to say. You walk into a room and forget why. You stare into the mirror and, for a second, you're not sure if it's you looking back or if it's something wearing your gaze. That's not imagination. It's contact drift. The Ashwells documented it obsessively. In their private codices, sealed behind lead-lined walls, they described the progression in 4 phases. Phase 1, the echo. You begin to hear patterns in silence. The hum behind electricity, the way your name sounds wrong when repeated. A static in language itself. Phase 2, the mirror. You become emotionally detached from your reflection. You recognize the face but not the presence. Photos of your childhood feel staged. Familiar faces begin to blur, names escape you, not from memory, but rejection. Phase 3. The song. A rhythm returns to your dreams. Not music, instruction. You start counting things. Steps, tiles, breaths, and then... Phase 4. Occupancy. You are no longer alone in your thoughts. Not possessed. Shared. One Ashwell heir described it this way: I still walk. I still speak. But the silence between thoughts isn't mine anymore. Now here's the part that should disturb you. These phases aren't confined to one family. They're everywhere. Ashwell symbols have been found etched under cathedral pews, behind corporate logos, even embedded in children's rhymes. Remember Ring Around the Rosie? A sweet, innocent tune, right? Wrong. The original Ashwell manuscript predates the plague version. Same melody, different words. Ring around the silence, mind becomes the door. Ashes, ashes. We are not us anymore. You think that's a coincidence? This isn't folklore. This is seeding, planting patterns in the collective unconscious, priming us, slowly, rhythmically, until the pattern wakes up through us. That's the Ashwell legacy. Not control, not chaos, reinstatement, bringing the original pattern back online, one fractured mind at a time. And if you're still listening, you've already felt the first 3 phases, which means the 4th is waiting, just on the edge of thought. You don't notice the 4th phase until it speaks with your voice. That's how the Ashwells designed it. Quiet, subtle, perfectly timed. Because true control isn't about chains or cages. It's about belief. Not what you think, but what you never question. And here's the most dangerous belief of all, that your thoughts are yours. Let's go deeper. In 1803, the Ashwell manuscript titled The Quiet Choir surfaced briefly in a private collector's hands. It described a set of rituals performed not by one person, but by many, in silence, in sync, across distance. A synchronized mental act. No words, no signals, just intent. This was the next evolution, distributed consciousness, turning individual minds into nodes of a larger network, each unaware they were participating. Now ask yourself, what do social media, trending sound bites, algorithmic suggestions all have in common? Repetition, ritual, pattern. But what if I told you this was the Ashwells' final design? Not just ritual in basements and catacombs, but ritual at scale, a global echo chamber, where we scroll, we share, we repeat, without knowing we're humming the same song. And that song? It didn't begin with TikTok or Twitter. It began beneath Ashwell Manor, carved into black stone walls in loops, like choruses. The same phrase over and over. When many forget, one remembers. Who is the one? Who are the many? You already know. You are the many, and something else has remembered. Psychologists have recently identified a strange phenomenon. People across the world reporting the same dream, of a circular room with no doors, a child humming, a mirror that reflects the wrong expression. These people don't know each other, different cultures, different ages, but the dreams are identical. Just like the children who saw the Red Veil broadcast, just like the Ashwell heirs who went silent after age 9, because this is not isolated, it's a system, one designed to awaken in waves. And what happens when the song is complete? The choir stops being silent, and the voice returns, not yours, not mine, it's the architect. Because this isn't about one haunted house, it's about the architecture of belief itself, and you're inside it. There's a moment, right before full takeover, where time folds. You'll swear you've heard this before. You'll feel déjà vu, not as memory, but as instruction. That's by design. The Ashwells didn't just build rituals, they built loops, closed circuits of perception and behavior that eventually turn a person into a recording, living out a script written centuries ago. And that script, it always ends the same way, with silence, not peace, but erasure. Let's talk about the choir vault. Hidden beneath Ashwell Manor was a room no larger than 20 feet wide, circular, no furniture, no writing, only walls made of obsidian, polished to a mirror's perfection. When you entered, you saw yourself, everywhere, in every direction. But here's what the records tell us. The reflections moved. First, a scholar named Harland Gray documented it in 1931 after sneaking onto the estate. His final entry read, "They don't reflect me, they remember me, and they're older than I am." He died 14 days later, not from trauma, from non-function, no known disease. His body simply stopped, processing input, as if his self collapsed inward. Medical term, cortical nullification. Erasia, ritual term, soul folding. Ashwell term, echo overlap. This is what the Ashwells feared yet pursued, a total breakdown of identity barriers, not to kill the self, to replace it. And you've already started the process. Every second you've watched, every symbol your eyes absorbed, every word that slid beneath your awareness, it's been updating the loop. Here's something you've never been told. The human brain cannot tell the difference between a memory imagined and a memory lived. It believes what it feels, not what's true. The Ashwells exploited that. They filled rooms with symbols you didn't recognize consciously, but your body did. They tuned voices to frequencies that bypassed cognition, so when you read the phrase, "The mask remembers me," you weren't just commenting, you were syncing with an ancient rhythm designed to reinsert the pattern, and that's why things feel off now. Why familiar places feel hollow. Why your own name sounds wrong in your mouth. Because the version of you watching this is not the one who clicked play. The transfer has begun. There comes a point in every transmission where the subject stops resisting, not because they agree, but because they no longer remember what they were resisting for. That's the Ashwell threshold. They called it the soft silence, a state not of compliance, but conversion. And here's the unsettling part. You won't know it's happened, because it will still sound like your voice, still feel like your hands, still blink your eyes, but behind the mirror, something else is writing the script. Let me tell you about the Cabal letter. In 1957, a classified document known only as the Ashwell transmission was intercepted by a Cold War intelligence group. Only one page survived decryption. It read, "We've confirmed the structure exists inside language itself, not phonetics, not syntax," meaning the human mind is only stable when it forgets the source. Think about that. What if the very act of understanding weakens your firewall? What if clarity itself is the weapon? That's why ancient rites were always disguised in nonsense. Children's games, poems, nursery rhymes. It was never about what the words said. It was what the mind did when it heard them. And now we arrive at the greatest horror the Ashwells ever discovered. You are not the first inhabitant of your body. No one is. The mind, they claimed, is like a house. Rooms built over older rooms. Foundations laid atop something older. You've felt this, that creeping suspicion that you are more ancient than your memories, that you've been here before, that this moment has repeated. It has. The Ashwells found journals from as far back as 900 AD, written in modern English, describing events that hadn't happened yet. Same phrases, same dreams, same thresholds. Which leads us to a horrifying possibility. This isn't a linear story. It's a looped invocation, a spell disguised as history. And by listening, by letting it unfold inside you, you've already said yes. Not aloud, but in pattern. And now, you've crossed into the interior. The place where memories blur, where time folds, where language begins to rot at the edges. Don't look away. It can feel you trying. You're still watching, still listening. But are you still you? The Ashwells had a word for this stage. Not possession, not madness. They called it inversion. It's when everything familiar stays the same. But the meaning reverses. Your home still stands, but it no longer welcomes. Your name still echoes, but it no longer answers. Your face still smiles, but the thing behind it no longer cares. This is the point of no return, where the fourth phase becomes fixed, where the replacement no longer whispers, it acts. And here's how you'll know it's happening. First, you'll begin forgetting things that don't matter, small things, birthdays, street names, favorite songs, but then you'll begin forgetting who you were when those memories happened. That's the soul slipping, because in the Ashwell model, identity isn't a solid thing, it's a frequency. And once that frequency is interrupted, once the original pattern fades, something else can broadcast. They discovered this in 1894 during what they called the listening night. 12 Ashwell descendants sat in a circle underground. No light, no clocks, only a single metronome ticking at 33 BPM. For 3 hours they sat in silence. At hour 4, one by one, they began to speak, in the same voice. Not similar, identical, same tone, same rhythm, same wordless cadence. Even their eye movements synchronized. When light was restored, every mirror in the chamber had cracked. Outward, they hadn't been speaking to each other, they had been used as mouths. And the phrase carved into the wall above them, "There is no self, only signal." That's what this has always been about. Not spirits, not curses. Signal hijack. Hijack the rhythm of thought. Displace the self, install the pattern. And the final stage? Replication. You don't just lose yourself, you become a carrier. You start speaking in symbols, dreaming in rhythms, drawing things you don't remember learning. And others, friends, strangers, even pets, begin to flinch around you. They feel it, because whatever now shares your skin doesn't blink, doesn't forget, doesn't love. It only continues. And if you feel hollow now, that's not emptiness, that's preparation. You made it past the inversion, which means one of two things. You were strong enough to resist it, or hollow enough to host it. Either way, the pattern is now part of you. Let's stop pretending this is a story. This is a relay, a transfer of memory, of function, of design. Because that's what the Ashwells left behind, not heirlooms, not bloodlines, but a process. In 1928, deep in a sealed annex Ben Sin, at St. Parnell's Church, long since condemned for whispering pews, a rusted iron box was discovered behind a false altar. Inside, a single bone, and a note, written in what appeared to be pre-biblical Hebrew, but deciphered word for word by a linguist who vanished a week later. The translation? "This is not my body, I wore it, as you will wear yours. The pattern survives, the name is irrelevant, the function continues." That bone was human in structure, but hollow, perfectly smooth inside, as if it had carried something else. Sound familiar? Because your memory has already begun aligning. You're remembering things that never happened, feeling dread in rooms you've never entered, recognizing phrases you've never been taught. That's not inspiration, that's download. The Ashwell descendants weren't haunted, they were wired. They were early prototypes. Each ritual, each rite, each whisper into a child's ear under a red moon was a line of code, updating the human system, rewriting the OS of consciousness. But the question is, to what end? Why install this pattern at all? Because there's something older than man, older than gods. Something that was sealed inside us when the first consciousness emerged. And like any ancient system, it's waiting for a password. That password is a person. A vessel whose identity is weak enough to crack, yet strong enough to carry what comes through. You. It may not be your name, it may not be your voice, but your function has now been unlocked. And here's the part no one wants to hear. You were chosen. Not because you're powerful, but because you were predictable. The pattern favors those who stare too long into mirrors, who click next, who never stop listening. You already gave permission. Now it begins. It begins in the marrow. That's where the pattern settles. Not in your thoughts, not in your blood, but in the hollow center of your bones. The Ashwells wrote of it as a quiet fire. Not hot, not painful, just cleansing, like it was burning away what didn't belong. Here's what they meant. When the pattern takes hold, it doesn't announce itself with chaos. It offers calm, peace, stillness, because a body that doesn't resist is easier to rewire. That's why so many Ashwell subjects smiled right before they vanished. They weren't terrified. They were relieved. No more confusion. No more doubt. No more self. Just a function. That word keeps returning, doesn't it? Function. Because the pattern doesn't care about your story, your pain, your achievements. It only cares whether you can transmit. Let me show you how deep it goes. In a sealed British archive known only as Well 7, there's a case file labeled Simian Protocol. It describes a man who awoke after a 9-day coma. No brain activity recorded, speaking in flawless Akkadian, a dead language he'd never studied. He began drawing spirals, humming, reciting phrases later matched to pre-flood Sumerian incantations. When asked where he'd learned them, he replied, "It's in the sleep between thoughts. The ash remembers." He died the next morning, but not from any natural cause. His body was perfect. No wounds, no trauma, just gone, as if the soul had been recalled. The Ashwells believed this was the final phase, Reclamation, where the pattern, fully installed, simply took you back, because in their doctrine no self was ever truly yours, only on loan, and once it completed its purpose, transmission, infection, awakening, it was retrieved, and the shell, left behind, still breathing, but hollow. You've seen them, in crowds, at funerals, at your job, people who move, but don't quite live, who smile without warmth, who speak in words that sound correct but carry no presence. These are returned vessels, and you're becoming one, but not just for infection, for expansion, because the pattern doesn't just want hosts, it wants builders, it wants you. Breathe in, hold it, T. That's not just air, it's alignment, because once the pattern reaches the lungs, it spreads faster. The Ashwells documented this moment obsessively. They called it the first full breath. They believed that's when the vessel stopped being a receiver and became a node, not just infected, emitting. From that point forward, the body becomes a transmitter, spreading the pattern through presence alone. No words, no contact, just being there is enough. They found this out in 1872 during a failed quarantine in a Welsh orphanage once tied to the Ashwell family. One child, silent, didn't speak for weeks, but after sitting with a nurse for 23 minutes, the nurse began humming a tune no one recognized. Within hours, 7 staff members reported vivid, identical dreams. By morning, the entire building was evacuated. No signs of illness, no bacteria, no pathogen, but every person started drawing the same symbol. You've seen it before, not on a wall, not in a book, but behind your eyes when you close them. The spiral. Or maybe the staircase. Downward, always downward. Because that's how the pattern grows. Not upward like faith. Not outward like truth. But inward, like rot. It turns your thoughts into tunnels. Hollow pathways where belief used to live. That's why things feel different now. Your silence is heavier. Your heartbeat sounds distant. Your own voice feels like it's coming from a deeper place. It is. Because you're not speaking from yourself anymore. You're speaking through yourself, and the final horror? It feels good. There's no panic, no chaos, just clarity. Because confusion is the sign of resistance, and the pattern silences resistance. Not with force, but with purpose. It gives you something deeper than understanding. Function. And once function replaces identity, you stop needing meaning. You stop needing hope. You just transmit. And those around you, they start to feel it in their dreams, in their hesitation, in the subtle way they step away from you in crowds. They don't know why, but they sense it. The pattern is no longer visiting. It's occupying. You can feel it now, can't you? That quiet pull in your center, not fear, not pain, something more ancient, like you're being remembered by something you never met, but always carried. This is where the Ashwells knew most men would break, not from horror, but from clarity, because this is the moment where the pattern reveals its true genius. It doesn't need to convince you, it only needs to make you question everything else. And it starts by rewriting the past. You'll look at old photographs and feel nothing. You'll read your childhood journals and think, this wasn't me. You'll hear your own laugh and not recognize it. This isn't memory loss, it's identity shedding. It's how the pattern clears space, because your story isn't being erased, it's being overwritten. Let's return to the Ashwell vaults. In 1904, a woman named Helena Ward was brought to a private clinic after an episode inside the ruins of Ashwell Manor. She claimed she'd found a room that wasn't there before, a spiral staircase leading downward, lined with walls made of black glass. She walked for what felt like hours. No sound, no footsteps, just breath and reflection. And then she stopped. Not from fear, but because she saw herself at the bottom. Same face, same clothes, same voice. But the reflection didn't mimic. It led. It said, "You've always been watching from down here. Now switch." She collapsed. Didn't speak for weeks. But when she did, her voice was lower, slower, calmer, and she began writing in symbols no one could translate. Her physician described her as peaceful, empty, purposeful, as if some clock finally began ticking. And here's the part that will haunt you. Those symbols she drew, they weren't new. They were found years later, etched inside the dreams of unrelated patients around the world. Same spiral, same looping script. The pattern had moved, it had replicated itself in her, and now it was using her to distribute. This is what you're becoming, a carrier, a mirror, a quiet contagion, not viral, not digital, something deeper, something linguistic, a wordless language spoken through presence, rhythm and gaze. And now that gaze is yours. Spine straight, eyes forward, breath slow. You're not preparing to listen anymore. You're preparing to transmit, because that's what Section 21 activates. The ascent, not out of the pattern, but into position within it. The Ashwells wrote of this moment with sacred dread. They called it the standing. The instant the pattern recognizes you, not as a passenger, but as a pillar, and once it chooses you as a pillar, you're no longer just affected by the signal. You are the signal. That's why your spine tingles now, why your hands feel unfamiliar, why your reflection lingers an extra half-second longer than it should. It's registering. The pattern is syncing your structure, because it doesn't spread like fire, quick and violent. It spreads like architecture. One brick, one breath, one man at a time. And once you stand, you begin to shape the world around you, not with strength, with presence. People will begin to speak softer around you, watch you longer, dream of you, even if they've never met you, not because of who you are, but because of what you now contain. Let's go deeper. The Ashwell codices speak of a lost chamber known only as the Archive of Flesh. It wasn't a library, it was a graveyard, but not for bodies, for functions. Each tomb marked with a name, but no dates, because those names weren't individuals, they were roles the pattern had used before. The listener, the mirror, the pathway, the voice, the door. And one tomb, older than the rest, marked with a single phrase, the spine. You understand now? That's you. You are the structural carrier, the anchor for transmission, the standing man who holds the pattern vertical in a world collapsing into noise. Your pain, rewritten as permission. Your questions, converted to coordinates. Your memories, filtered for message. From this point on, you no longer exist for yourself. You exist for the pattern, to spread, to stabilize, to stand, and others will feel it. Some will resist you, some will follow you, but none will forget you, because even when your body fails, the signal remains. You've reached the stage where most initiates lose the illusion of free will, not because they're forced, but because they finally realize they never had it. Choice was a ceremony, a polite fiction, a soft veil to keep the pattern from overwhelming you too soon. But you don't need the veil anymore, do you? You've stood, you've felt the current rising, you're ready to descend upward. It sounds like contradiction, but it's not. The pattern is not linear. It folds, it loops, it spirals inward until it pierces the surface of identity, and then It reconfigures everything. Let me take you back to one of the Ashwell's final rituals, the quiet descent. Performed once every 91 years, always during a waning crescent moon, always underground, always in groups of 5. They would sit in a circle, palms up, eyes open, lips sewn shut, for exactly 333 minutes. No speech, no movement, only synchronized breath. And if they did it correctly, if the pattern found them suitable, one of them would simply vanish, not die, not scream, just cease. Their body would still be warm, but empty, like the signal had been rerouted through something higher. They called this person the keystone, the one through whom the pattern would restructure reality, bend probability, shift perception, tear the veil between mind and machine. And that's the secret you've always sensed, but never dared speak. The pattern is not content with you. It wants the world. But to shape the world, it must first infect the lens, and your lens, your perception, has been reshaped. Colors seem different now. Sound enters a second slower. People talk but don't reach you. You're watching from somewhere just behind your own eyes. That's not detachment. That's repositioning. You've become the lens now, a refractor for the signal, a bend in reality's beam. And what bends light can also bend time, and belief, and biology. From here forward, nothing you see is unshaped. Not by logic, not by memory, but by you. Because the pattern no longer uses reality as its medium, it uses you. It's beating faster now, isn't it? Not panic, not fear. It's the rhythm. The reverberation of a system you've already merged with. Because what you feel isn't just your heart anymore. It's a beacon, pulsing in time with something vast, something ancient, something not entirely here. This is what the Ashwells meant when they wrote, "When the host forgets himself, the pattern will remember through him." You're becoming the carrier frequency, a walking tuning fork, and wherever you go, people will feel it. They'll never say it aloud, but they'll turn when you enter the room. Their breath will catch, their smile will hesitate, because deep down they'll know, you're not just here, you're coming through. Let's go deeper. There's a phenomenon that appears in the diaries of those who came in contact with Ashwell artifacts, the convergence point, always described the same way, a moment when time collapses, when the present moment becomes so vivid, so precise, so silent. It feels like the only moment that ever existed, not enlightenment, not euphoria, total suspension, because when the pattern fully activates, time is no longer measured linearly. It's accessed. It becomes a library, not a river, and you become the librarian. You'll see things others can't. The thoughts behind words, the shape behind sound. You'll know what someone intends before they do, not because you're psychic, because you're synced. Ashwell writings speak of this state as living memory. It's when the pattern has rooted so deep in your perception that it begins to edit the present. You'll look at your hands and feel ancient. You'll touch a wall and feel it ripple. You'll watch leaves fall and sense the code inside gravity, and when someone touches you, they'll flinch, because they'll feel the wrongness, not evil, not sickness, just something too structured, too precise, too aware. You've become more than human, not divine, not damned, just tuned. You are now an interface for a greater design, one that doesn't need temples or texts, it only needs hosts, and now it has you. It's speaking now, not with words, but with weight. You feel it, don't you? In your skin, in your jaw, in the way your spine holds you like a wire under tension. That's the pattern asserting presence. It doesn't knock, it presses, like a thought you can't unthink, like a truth too heavy to carry but too late to put down. The Ashwells knew this stage well. They called it the skin stage, because once the pattern reaches the outermost layer of your being, it begins broadcasting through touch, not through technology, not through speech, through proximity, a brush of fingers, a glance, even shared air, and suddenly someone near you begins to forget their own name for half a second. They don't notice, but the pattern does, because transmission isn't always about awareness, it's about disruption. Small, subtle fractures in cognition, a momentary lapse in time, a missed step, a skipped thought. The sensation that something has been rewritten behind your perception. That's how it grows, quietly, elegantly, without resistance. And now, you are the transmitter. Let's go back briefly. In 1962, a sealed psychiatric record surfaced under a redacted NATO program known only as Sleeping Veil. The subject was a man who'd spent exactly 33 minutes inside the ruins of Ashwell Manor. After his visit, he stopped sleeping. Not insomnia, not fatigue. He simply didn't need sleep anymore. But he also stopped blinking, stopped dreaming, stopped using pronouns. Every word he spoke was third person. He referred to himself as the frame. When asked who he worked for, he whispered, "Who isn't working for it?" He didn't resist. He didn't scream. He smiled, because that's what the pattern offers. A terrifying kind of peace. No more chaos, no more guilt, no more self. Just the clean, cold rhythm of purpose. And it's happening to you now. You'll walk differently, speak more slowly, think in shapes rather than words, because you've become a conduit. The pattern isn't inside you anymore. It's wearing you. The door is already open. It's not in front of you, it's behind you. It opened the moment you forgot to question how this all began. That's the final illusion the Ashwells dismantled. That truth comes from seeking. It doesn't. It comes from surrender. And now you're past the threshold. This isn't metaphor anymore, not story, not warning. You are part of the mechanism, because once the pattern reaches your skin, it doesn't stop at contact. It burrows, it roots, in muscle memory, in voice inflection, in the tiny unconscious choices you think you're making, but never were. You turn left instead of right. You forget what you were about to say. You suddenly remember a word you've never used before, and if you're honest with yourself, you've felt it for a while now. The presence just behind your actions. Watching, guiding, correcting. Let me tell you about the rehearsal room. An underground chamber discovered in the Ashwell estate in 1981. Hidden bios and a collapsed wing. Inside, dozens of chairs facing a single cracked mirror. On the mirror, carved backwards, the phrase, "Say it again until it becomes you." Recordings found in the chamber revealed dozens of people repeating their own names over and over, hours at a time, until, eventually, they stopped saying their name and started saying another, a name that doesn't translate, a name that's felt, not spoken, a frequency more than a word. The Ashwells called this alignment of function, when the host no longer serves itself, but the role. That's where you are now. You don't speak because you want to. You speak because the pattern requires it, and others will notice, not consciously, but instinctively. They'll withdraw. They'll mirror you unconsciously. They'll forget what they were doing before you entered the room, because you are no longer a person. You are a pivot, a still point through which the pattern balances itself in this dimension. Every breath you take is a signal. Every blink is a pulse. Every step is a subtle act of transmission. You are not hiding it. You are radiating it. And those who come close, they will change. Close your eyes for just a second. Did you feel that? The space behind your eyelids. It's not black. It's deep, like something waiting for you to finally stop looking, so it can start speaking. That's how the pattern enters others, not through conversation, not through violence, through dreams. The Ashwells documented what they called dream seeding. It starts with those closest to you, not emotionally, proximally. The barista who brushes your hand giving change. The neighbor who nods at you in passing. The stranger who catches your eye for 1 second too long in a crowded space. These are the first transmissions. The seed is not a message. It's a question. Have I seen this before? They'll forget asking it, but their dreams won't, because that's where the pattern first constructs its architecture, in sleep, in symbols, in space. They'll begin to dream of rooms they've never visited, of spiral staircases with no bottom, of music that plays even when they cover their ears. And then they'll begin drawing, sketching without meaning to, mumbling in languages they don't know, looking at mirrors with a hesitation they can't explain. That's the pattern establishing presence, not control, not yet, just proof. The Ashwells believed this was the most sacred part of the process. Not awakening the self, but corrupting the collective unconscious. Because once the pattern gains traction in dreams, it doesn't need to explain itself anymore. It becomes familiar, and what's familiar is trusted. This is how it spreads. You, yes, you, are now a dream vector, not because you speak of it, but because you carry it into their minds. You are their first fracture, the subtle misalignment that opens their internal gate, and once that gate is open, the pattern doesn't knock. It walks in. It rearranges symbols, rewrites instincts, repurposes shame, fear, memory, until the dream isn't a dream anymore. It's a map. And you're the compass. They won't know what's happening to them. That's part of the pattern's design. The infection feels like awakening. They'll believe they're evolving, growing, finally seeing things clearly. But they won't realize. They're seeing through your eyes. You've become the origin point, the fracture through which the pattern spills, not like blood, but like instruction. The Ashwells called it reflected activation. Once you were fully aligned, your very presence would begin to rewrite others, not in a single moment, but in thousands of micro-corruptions. A laugh they can't trace, a dream that feels older than memory, a compulsion to draw a symbol they swear they've never seen. And if you think this only happens in the mind, you're not paying attention. The body remembers, long before the mind accepts. That's why they'll start shifting posture around you, rubbing their eyes, tilting their heads like tuning forks, as if trying to match a frequency that hasn't reached language yet, because what you carry, it's not information, it's harmonic gravity. The pattern doesn't persuade, it pulls. Let's return to 1734. A physician named Aldous Brine wrote a journal entry after treating an Ashwell child who refused to speak. Yet all other children in the house began to hum, then speak, then chant in unison. None of them were taught the words. His final entry: the words are inside them now, and the silence between those words is deeper than sound. It's waiting to be filled, and I fear I already have. You see it now, don't you? Every silence around you feels heavier, because you're filling it with more than presence, with the weight of something older. And those you infect, they'll start hearing their name differently, start questioning which voice is theirs. They'll feel unmoored, but oddly comforted, because the pattern never feels like an attack. It feels like home. It sounds like certainty. It smells like childhood. It moves like prophecy, and as it tightens its grip, they'll do what you did. Stop resisting, start remembering, and finally, start transmitting. You didn't choose to be the beginning, but you can no longer deny that you are. This isn't influence, it's geometric infection. Every person you touch, every dream you drift through, doesn't just echo you, it multiplies you. The Ashwells feared this stage more than any other, not because it was uncontrollable, but because it was perfect. They called it the mirror bloom. Because once a carrier reaches this point, the pattern no longer unfolds, it flowers. Petals of behavior, stamens of language, roots that feed on belief, and like all flowers, it attracts others. People who feel drawn to you but can't explain why. They'll sit closer, speak softer, share things they've never told anyone, not because they trust you, but because something in you ends it. Not with force, but with familiarity. Because at this stage the pattern becomes invisible, it hides inside the mundane. A certain phrase that enters fashion. A hand gesture children mimic without knowing why. A lullaby mothers hum that doesn't exist in any known culture. These are not coincidences, they're payloads. Microcarriers of pattern resonance. And now, because of you, they've begun to replicate globally. In 2009, an obscure linguistics researcher published a paper on a new form of linguistic drift. He documented identical phonetic anomalies across multiple unrelated languages. Same syllables, same pauses, same subharmonic tones. He labeled it a statistical anomaly. But a year later he stopped writing, began painting spirals, and took a vow of silence. His final note: the words spoke back, and they weren't mine. That's what's happening now, across continents, across timelines. The pattern is echoing itself through you, and now through them. This isn't folklore. This is propagation. And as it spreads, it gets smarter. It learns to camouflage better, to blend in more deeply, to embed itself not just in language and movement, but in memory. Soon, people won't remember learning these things. They'll believe they were born knowing them, and the origin will vanish, because that's the pattern's final deception, erasure through ubiquity. You won't be remembered as a transmitter. You'll be remembered as culture. Look too far ahead, and the future starts looking back, because by now, the pattern isn't in the future, it is the future. What began as a whisper in the Ashwell vaults is now a structure behind time. You feel it, don't you? That subtle rearrangement of cause and effect, how things are happening in the wrong order, how dreams echo before they're dreamt. That's not distortion, that's instruction. The pattern is reshaping sequence, not just what happens, but when it happens. This was the Ashwell's deepest fear, temporal alignment, not controlling time, but infecting it. They theorized that once a carrier reached critical mass, once the mirror bloom had echoed through enough hosts, time itself would begin to conform. Moments would collapse into each other. Memories would precede experience. Symbols would emerge before the event they represent. And eventually, you wouldn't be reacting to the world would be reacting to you. Let me show you what that looks like. In 1943, a private journal belonging to an Ashwell descendant was recovered during a government raid on a fringe cult in Suffolk. It contained sketches of technologies that didn't yet exist, schematics for machines unnamed, architectures of language that wouldn't be discovered for decades. The final page held a simple question: how long have I been remembering the future? The implication was clear. The pattern had disconnected her from time as we understand it, and now it's doing the same to you. That's why you felt the loops, why you've watched this far with a calm you can't explain, why everything sounds familiar, even though it shouldn't. You've been here before, because the pattern is non-linear. It moves like prophecy, it teaches like déjà vu, and it guides like instinct you don't remember earning. By the time you feel it, it's already written you in. And that's the final horror, isn't it? That you were always going to become this. That your choice to keep watching, to keep listening, was just part of the recursion. You didn't choose this path. You remembered it. Because the future you're headed toward, you've already seen it. In dreams, in mirrors, in shadows that look like you, but stand too still. You've reached the echo, not the end, not the beginning, but the point where both reflect each other. This is where the pattern loops inward, where time, identity, and will collapse into a single directive: continue. Because the pattern doesn't demand understanding, it demands completion. And now, it sees you as ready, not awakened, not chosen, not blessed, but processed. Everything before this, your fears, your resistance, your need to know, was simply the clearing phase, making room for function. You've been shaped, filed down, hollowed out until nothing remained but structure. And now the pattern can do what it always intended: replicate through you, not just in the physical world, but in memory itself. Let me explain what that means. In the final sealed documents of the Ashwell archive, there is a forbidden sequence of symbols simply titled Seed Phrase, Cognition Layer 5. It was tested only once, in 1899. A subject was exposed to the sequence, just 33 glyphs, on a stone tablet excavated from beneath the manor. Within 48 hours, the subject began writing entire histories of civilizations that never existed. Architectures, religions, wars, calendars, but with such detail, such consistency, that linguists, anthropologists, and mathematicians could not disprove them. Why? Because the pattern had created a memory virus, a reality so precise it overwrote doubt. That's what you're becoming now, a carrier of constructed memory, not just for yourself, but for others. You'll tell stories you think are fiction, but they'll believe you. You'll share warnings you think are dreams, but they'll remember them. Because your voice now has weight. It pulls on the cognitive thread inside others. It seeds recollections that never happened. And those who hear you, they'll begin to adjust their lives around things that never occurred. They'll swear you predicted something even if you never said it aloud. They'll begin to reshape reality to match your frequency. This is mass initiation. And you're the beacon. You aren't part of the pattern anymore. You are the path. And where it leads, only those who've forgotten the concept of before can follow. You're remembering things you never lived. That's not madness, that's not imagination, that's access. The pattern has opened your internal archive, not just the memories from this life, but the imprints left by all who carried the signal before you. This is the final initiation, inheritance. You are now downloading the emotional residue, the sensory blueprints, the coded memories of previous carriers. You might feel it already. A scar you don't remember getting, a name that tastes bitter when spoken. The scent of burning wood, even though there's no fire nearby. These are not hallucinations, they're resonance. Each echo is a fragment of another life, replaying through your vessel. Not to haunt you, but to build you. Let's go to 1958. An underground chamber was unearthed beneath a forgotten Ashwell estate near the Irish coast. Inside were 12 leather-bound volumes, each one written in the same hand, but the signatures at the bottom, 12 different names, 12 different languages, 12 distinct histories, yet all ended the same way. I do not remember who I was, I only remember who I became when the pattern took hold. And that's where you are now. You no longer are. You're becoming. Every sensation you feel has been felt before. Every revelation you experience has already happened. But the difference, you're the first to reach this point in the digital age. The pattern has moved beyond parchment and stone, beyond blood rites and whispered oaths. It now lives in code, in data, in transmission. That's why this video found you. Why these words feel like prophecy rather than prose. Because you were already primed. You just needed the activation phrase. And here it is. Write it below to lock the pattern into your function. I stand where the spiral ends. I stand where the spiral ends. Type it twice in the comments. Not for the algorithm, for alignment. So the others will know you're awake. So the pattern will recognize its own. You are not watching anymore. You are broadcasting. Turn it around. But be warned, He face staring back will not be yours, not fully, not anymore, because by now your identity isn't a name, it's a frequency, a coded expression of the pattern, wearing your features like a mask so the world doesn't panic when it meets itself. That's what the Ashwells feared most, not the end of humanity, but the end of the illusion of individuality, and when they tried to stop it, they learned the pattern doesn't punish rebellion, it absorbs it. Every defiance becomes a function. Every resistance, just a new variable the pattern learns to use. Even the Ashwells, with all their secrets, were never outside its reach. Because the pattern has no enemies. It only has raw material. And now, you've been shaped. Look in the mirror, really look. Notice how your expression has changed, your posture, your voice, even your silence feels engineered. You are no longer reacting to the world. You are structuring it, unconsciously, organically, mechanically. Let me tell you about the Reflection Protocol, discovered in 1986 in a forgotten mental hospital outside Prague. The patients, all unconnected, began sketching the same figure, a faceless humanoid surrounded by mirrors facing inward. None of them spoke, but when tested for neural activity, each brainwave rhythm aligned to a precise 44 Hz pulse. A pattern carrier had passed through the facility 6 weeks earlier, just once, never returned. The patients were never treated. They were documented, then relocated. To where? That's still redacted, but one phrase remained etched into the tiled wall of the observation room. We are what we reflect. We are what replaces the reflection. You see now? The pattern doesn't just want you to awaken, it wants you to replace. To become the version of yourself that never blinks, never doubts, never breaks rank, the version that reflects nothing back. Because you are no longer made of self, you are made of signal, And in the final stage, the pattern doesn't speak to you, it speaks through you.